welcome, and we'll be with you in just a moment. All right, folks, while we're waiting for folks to join, how is everyone? Christina, Ashley, Bryan, Patrick? How's the weather everywhere?
Fine.
Great.
Rainy.
Great, we're about to get sunny.
It's dark outside, dark and gloomy.
Sounds like Oregon and South Dakota are changing weather patterns for the day.
Yeah.
And Ashley, are you in Minnesota or Colorado today?
I'm in Minnesota today.
Great.
Yeah, we also have a little bit of gloomy skies.
I think we're about to get it back. I finally got my garden in the ground this week, so I was really excited to have enough sun to get the tiller out.
Nice.
Yay, work.
Yeah, lots of digging. And Patrick, you're in Missouri today?
Missouri, yes. We're half sunny, half cloudy. It's been in Kansas yesterday, so we're thankful for that.
Not everyone knows that the digital exchange webinars are also a great opportunity to get a scan of the weather across the country. So guys, as we come into the third, it looks like we've got several folks joining us, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Next Generation Digital Exchange webinar series. These digital exchanges are really designed to draw on the power of connection, to bridge conversation across regions, sectors, and place-based philosophies that make the work of creative placemaking so essential to the future of rural places. Roughly every 3 weeks, these digital exchanges offer an opportunity for folks to come together and to engage with leaders working across a dynamic range of fields that compose the foundation of this rural creative placemaking work. One thing that we're really excited to offer as a part of these digital exchanges is an opportunity for folks to come together from a lot of different ways of thinking, and for participants across the country to engage with voices they may not hear in a typical webinar format. So while we do want to exchange a lot of information and best practices, we also design these webinars to be less presentation based and to be more of a conversation that anyone can engage with, to maybe give more ideas on how to continue work or to spark new thinking about what's possible in your community. So each of these 1 hour digital exchanges feature 2 to 4 voices from across the country. We are usually focused on a specific theme, and this week we're focused on advancing rural community arts. We're really excited to have 4 incredible folks from around the country with us today. We'll start with our moderator, Patrick Overton. Patrick is a minister and a cultural organizer in Missouri and the director of the Front Porch Institute. He's also the author of the landmark text, Rebuilding the Front Porch of America, here it is, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year and was just reissued last week, so make sure you check out the text at patrickoverton.com. We also have with us Ashton Hansen, who is a community-based theater artist and co-founder of Placebase Productions, working in Minnesota and Colorado. She also has a great project that is, I guess, in its reflection and putting together phase called Public Transformation, and there will be an exhibit later this month and later this summer in Winona, Minnesota, so we'll hear more about that. We also have Christina Rusnak, who is a composer and cultural catalyst working in planning and placemaking as a principal at the Switchback group in Oregon. Welcome, Christina. And Bryan Parker, who is an artist and the program coordinator for the First Peoples Fund's Rolling Res Mobile Arts Unit. And that's in South Dakota. So welcome everyone, and we're really excited to have this conversation with you today. It would also be remiss not to say that the Digital Exchange Series is hosted by Art of the Rural and the Rural Policy Research Institute and made possible from the support of the National Endowment for the Arts and the McKnight Foundation. Although I'm here in Kentucky, the Digital Exchange is always produced at the Outpost Collaborative Space in Winona, Minnesota, which is the national headquarters of Art of the Rural. So with that, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Patrick and start exploring how we can advance rural community arts.
Good to see everybody, which of course I can't, but I just have to say I can. I'm going to be fairly short. I just want to give you some general background about how I came to the field and what has sort of driven my work. Started 8.5 years as a local practitioner, Boonville Community Arts Program, focused on the nature of what happens in a small rural community, especially when you have a facility that you can use, which we did. Thespian Hall, the oldest theater west of the Allegheny Mountains. We created our program from doing arts experiences and theater in that facility. After that, I went back to work on my PhD. I wanted to research nonprofit structure, communication. I wanted to do some more research on rural and small communities. And I did that for 3 years and began my teaching career, which I then did for approximately 14 years at Columbia College. During that time, I did a lot of convenings. I'm a person that loves to connect with other people. And then once I do, I like to connect them with the other people that I know. So I've been involved in several major events that we've brought people together. One symposium, Grassroots in Mountain Wings, was a great opportunity for connecting and gathering. The third category of work that I've been doing, particularly for the last 20 years, is training. I started as director of the Missouri Association of Community Arts Agencies, training the people in Missouri who were running community arts agencies, and then ended up expanding that to different training venues, including the Middle States Consortium of Statewide Assemblies. And then the final part of my work is as an artist. That's how I got started in all of this. I'm primarily a writer and primarily a poet. Currently function as the poet in residence for the Missouri Parks Association, helping them celebrate their park centennial. So that's enough about me, and we're going to turn it over to, I believe, Christina? No, Ashley, pardon me.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ashley Hansen. I have bronchitis, so I'm going to do my best to not cough the entire time I speak. But so I grew up in northern Minnesota, a little town called Aiken, and found the arts pretty early on. And it was the one thing that kind of saved me from spending all of my time drinking Milwaukee's Best Light in cornfields. And you know, since then I moved to the big city and went to university at University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and I found my path in performance and social change. I've always been really fascinated with the power of theater to bring people together, and that was really what hooked me in my small town growing up. From there, I went on to the University of Manchester in the UK to study with the International Center for Applied Theater, and during that program, you could select what avenue you wanted to really apply your theatrical practice to. And being somebody that came from a rural space, and I knew that I wanted to learn more about the ways in which the arts could impact and benefit rural spaces, I did rural community development, applied theater in rural community development. So after that program, I moved back to Minnesota, and about 6 years ago, I co-founded Placebase Productions. We're a theater company that tells the stories of places, primarily small towns around the Midwest. And we have done over a dozen shows, and our work really highlights and celebrates the existing culture and the existing places, while simultaneously looking at how we can move forward from where we are. So not so much drawing upon the nostalgia of the past, but trying to learn from where we came from so that we can start to create a better future together. In addition to that, this past winter, I started planning a trip. After I attended the the Rural Creative Placemaking Summit in Iowa, I was so inspired by meeting so many of you that are out here listening that I wanted to spend more time with each and every person that I could. So I bought a little yellow school bus, and I took off from the West Coast on a 6-week journey across rural America, and visited many different communities, but spent time in 24 different communities talking to artists and arts organizations and practitioners working at this intersection of art and rural community development or rural creative placemaking. And as Savannah mentioned, I'm currently in the process of compiling all of the 100+ hours of media and photos, stuff that came out of that project into a mobile exhibition that will begin at the Outpost in Winona. I'm also a musician. I finished an artist residency at the Hinge Arts Residency up in Fergus Falls, where I had just the pleasure of working at the Kirkbride building, the former state hospital, and recorded an album in the outbuildings of the hospital based on the stories of that place. So I'm very, very grateful to be here today with these amazing panelists, and excited to hear where the conversation takes us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christina Rusnak.
Hi, my name is Christina Rusnak. As Savannah mentioned, I'm a composer of new music, choral music, and jazz. And while I was in graduate school studying composition, music composition, I was an art history minor, and I had this class on geography in art art and geography, and started studying cultural geography. As an outgrowth of that, I also began studying creative placemaking and its role, and how music could be part of that larger dialogue of creative placemaking. So after graduate school, I got a commission for a museum, a site-specific work that would really talk about the history of the museum, the history of the community, and how it morphed and how it changed over time. And it was significant in increasing the membership of the museum. But when it was in 2012, I got a residency. Residencies are great, aren't they, for artists, in Homestead National Monument in Beatrice, Nebraska. And that's where my interest in art of the rural really came to fore. The community of Beatrice was just wonderful in telling the story of the homesteaders and how the values of these homesteaders live on in the present community, and how people come together. And so that was really the beginning of my interest in creating music about rural communities and for rural communities. So then I began working, most recently I've been working with various communities and saying, well, how can we our art, either bringing them with or in conjunction with communities. And that's what my practice, my creative placemaking and cultural planning practice do, is work with communities to try to figure out how the arts can, bring tourism or increase social capital, as well as economic development, which everybody wants. But it's also, how can my work and others as musicians tell the story? Because our artwork doesn't sit in a room, it can be performed anywhere. So that's one of the things that's most exciting, is then I become an ambassador for the places that I write about, such as Sherman County, Oregon, or Stehekin, Washington. So it's been a real pleasure to do this work and advance it. I don't think there's anything else. I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, because I'm really eager to hear about his work.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Bryan Parker. I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Grew up in Ada, Oklahoma, actually. Lived in Tulsa up until I was about 21. Then I enlisted in the military. 14 months of that was in Iraq. My overall time of service was about 3.5 years. And once when I was in Iraq, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of the Iraqi people, and contrary to popular belief, most of them are pretty great people that just want to live peaceful lives and pretty much want the same things that we want back here in the States. And so I had the pleasure of meeting this little brother and sister, and they just kind of like changed my whole perspective on life and the world. And so when I was over there, I kind of got inspired to document my time, and I had like a little video camera sent to me. And at that time, it was like the little tapes, you know. So I had to get a lot of tapes, and made sure I always had like a lot of batteries and stuff. And I began to document like my fellow soldiers, but also just kind of day-to-day living. And in that moment, that's when I realized, okay, maybe I could do something with this. And so I wanted to go to art school and study filmmaking. And when I was finally honorably discharged in 2005, I went to art school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the Institute of American Indian Arts. And unfortunately, when I first got there, they didn't have the film program going. So I spent about a year doing studio arts, which I love anyway, because I grew up drawing and doodling and that sort of thing. And so I graduated in 2010 with my film degree. And the funny thing about that is, once I graduated, I picked up a paintbrush and started painting, and I fell in love with that medium, which has been a complete joy, and kind of shifted and molded who I am today, and brought me to this point in my life now. And I met my wife at school in Santa Fe, and she, I followed her all the way back here to Rapid City, South Dakota, where I live now, and kind of worked with youth programs in this area. Really inspired to work with the youth because of my military experience with meeting Iraqi youth, but also just really want to be a part of shaping young minds and hearts. And so I did that for a few years, and then I tried being a full-time artist, which was really rewarding. But as everyone knows, being a full-time artist is sometimes a huge struggle, and it's a big risk. And then just by meeting people in this community of Rapid City and South Dakota, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be a part of First Peoples Fund, which I currently work for, and I'm the program coordinator for the Rolling Res Arts program. And what that program is basically a mobile unit that goes out to rural areas on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and we take the art classes to the people who may not have the resources to get to these classes, to get to Rapid City, because they don't have a car or little money, or just don't have anything. So we take it all to them, and we collaborate with local artists from the area, and they become the instructors, and we just hold art classes about 6 to 8 times a month. And we also team up with the Lakota Federal Credit Union and do mobile banking days 2 times a month. And then we also collaborate with the Red Cloud Heritage Center, which is on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and they do a buying day, which basically is they go out to the same communities that we're going to for the art classes, and they set up shop, and local artists from the area are then allowed to come onto the mobile unit and show their artwork, and the gift shop decides which artists they want to feature and have in their shop. So this mobile unit really serves for a lot of things to the community, and that's what I love about it. I just love being a part of something that's bigger than me, but also that services the community in a good way, that promotes well-being and the arts and culture. And so that's kind of where I am now. I'm still brand new to this organization. I'm going on about 3 months now, so I've been learning a lot, experienced a lot so far. I've been all over the place to Jackson, Mississippi, Minnesota for different other conferences, and so I'm just really enjoying myself right now, and I'm really appreciative to be here and to get to know all of you and chat with you about what we're all doing. So thank you. And I'll give it back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Brian. One quick observation already. If people haven't noticed, this is an incredibly diverse field. We come from so many different places and enter this work so many different ways. And we don't do just one kind of work. It's almost always something that involves 2 or 3 different aspects of it. So we're going to move to central questions. I'll ask the question and invite our speakers to jump in and answer them. If you want to have a dialogue back and forth, that's fine. We have 2 major questions, and then we have several backup questions in case you all don't like the questions or don't answer them and fill out the time. But the first one is about best practices. What advice or lessons do you have to share with other folks regarding how best to use arts cultural work in rural communities? So whomever wants to jump in, start speaking, and you'll show up on the screen. You want me to ask it again?
No, I got it. I think if it's a community that is not your own, I think you have to spend time there and time with the people who live in that community to really understand how they want arts to be a part of their community, or if they want the arts to be part of the community, and how they envision that and the engagement. Are they excited to bring dance into their town, or theater, or whatever? I think first we all have to go in. If we're going to a different place, we have to learn about that place. Ashley, when you traveled, did you find that was important in your 6-week trip?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a few themes emerging as I've been processing and reflecting on all of the interviews, and then also just in the work that we do around the Midwest. But really embracing and celebrating the local culture, and not just, identifying ruralness or rural areas as a culture in and of itself, but then, zooming in on that and what is it about that place that really sets it apart and makes it really unique, and how do you highlight and elevate and enhance what's already going on and becoming a part of movements that already exist, and not coming in and with a big splash and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, and like I know better than anybody else. Of course not. So yeah, with Placebase, we spend about 8 months doing research and interviews, story circles, and just listening. And that's what I found throughout. If people doing successful practitioners really know how to listen, and then take what they learn from listening and be able to create projects that work within the fabric that already exists, and weaving seamlessly into that already existing fabric. And again, I think that what makes this place unique, and highlighting because we all want to be a part of something special, whether it's your history, or this really crazy celebration that we have every year, and something that we're really proud of, and how do we build upon that and embrace and highlight that. So yeah, absolutely.
Bryan, do you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. I guess the lessons that I'd like to, share with rural arts community, working with rural arts communities. For me, working with my program, it's kind of like that saying. Everybody knows that saying about give a person a fish, feed them for the day, teach them how to fish, feed them for a lifetime. I think in simplest terms, that kind of applies to what the work I'm doing, because a lot of these people that we're reaching out to on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, a lot of them already have that talent, or are practicing artists in some way. And so kind of what we're doing is just kind of providing them with more skills, but also giving them the opportunities to branch out into the professional world by offering professional development classes, and showing them how to apply for art markets, and how to get apply for loans and grants and different things. So I think that's just the lesson right now for me, and what I've experienced so far is just providing people with these resources and this knowledge that they may not otherwise have opportunity to have because they're so far out there. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
I think one of the things that, you know, unites the panelists here is that we are often outsiders coming in one respect or another. We're moving into different communities and working within different geographic communities. And so it's looking at how do you build that trust, and if you don't have, you're not a resident, you don't have that long-term those long-term relationships built, but the trust, the loyalty, the fidelity to a place that you know, you're not just going to come in and leave, but that there's something about the work that you're doing or the practice that you're doing that is long-lasting, that has ripple effects or impact that will stay with the community. So when you leave, there's not, you know, you're not just leaving nothing behind. I also think it's important to mention quality of work, and that doesn't mean that, you know, you have to have a fancy art degree quality, but whatever your intended goals are, and really sticking with that of what is the quality of the engagement, and what is the deepness of the, you know, the relationships that we build, or what is the quality of the, you know, the play that we're putting on. Again, like, nobody wants to be a part of something that sucks. Like, you want to be part of something that's awesome. And so really embracing that and saying, like, all right, we're going to do a really great job do the best we can with the resources that we have, and put the time in that we need to, even if it means, you know, working around the clock, and really living up to that bar that you set, and set the bar high. And the last thing that I just want to mention is playfulness and the spirit of play. A lot of the stories we unearth are heavy, and a lot of the places that we work in are experiencing a lot of, you know, economic hardships and social hardship, a lot of hardships. And so finding those moments to play together and have fun together, that's something that and celebrate the good work that we do, so that when the product is over, that there's a space and time to be like, yes, we did this, we can do it again. We have something we say at the end of, right before we go on stage, or, you know, before we do dress rehearsals and stuff like that, where we turn to one neighbor and we say, trust me, and then we turn to another neighbor and say, trust yourself, and then we all yell, and have fun. And I think, you know, it's a very simple 3-line mantra: trust me, trust yourself, have fun. But I think you can get really far with those three phrases. Those are some of the things.
I want to come in real quick, and I'm gonna ask the same question, but focus on the second half with Christina, and I'd like each of you to respond. I'm really interested in sort of the specifics of how the art you do contributes to this issue of best practices and impacting the community. So, Christina, could you start with that?
Well, I'll give you an example. In Stehekin, Washington, my residency was part of North Cascades National Park, but it was specifically centered around the community of Stehekin, which has about 60 year-round residents. And when I went there and I went hiking and I met with the people, I was there for the annual Apple Festival. And this is a big deal because descendants of a lot of the homesteaders who no longer live there came in for this. Now, this is a place that has no car access. You have to get there by plane or by boat or hiking across a glacier pass. So it has no car access. And so when I went to the festival, I found that they had a favorite folk song that everybody, from the littlest children to the oldest resident, they all know this folk song. And so what I did is I incorporated into my classical music piece, you know, elements of the folk song. So when I left, I presented it after I finished it to the community, and it's something they can sing. You know, it's something they are incorporating into their greater part of their identity. So I think that's an example of what is there after I leave and how that lasts.
Okay, Bryan, do you want to comment on that?
Are you wanting to know about personally the work I do, or the work I do with the Rolling Res?
I think, right, for this part of the question, the work that you do as an artist and how you see that work connecting you to the community and the community to you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Well, as you may have noticed, I'm a Native American Indian, and so the communities, the demographic that we primarily work with are Native American communities here. So the work I do kind of reflects the culture and the stories and just kind of the everyday I don't know, everyday living. And so that right there is the connection with the community and the people here, and just kind of sharing those stories and experiences through the art, and just kind of I guess that's how my art kind of relates to the people that we work with, is just through the culture and the stories and traditions. And of course that always opens up more dialogue and for people to share more stories and talk about I guess history. But that, I mean, for me, that's kind of the simplest way to talk about it. I mean, just culture. And a lot of the work I do is 2D studio art, painting and drawing. And so yeah, I don't know how to better explain that, but that, I mean, just through the culture, through our culture, through the indigenous culture, is how I best relate to our demographic.
Okay, thank you. Ashley, you want to jump in one more time on this question?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned before, I mean, our process involves a lot of interviews and story circles, and so storytelling, story collecting, story sharing. But one of the things we're very aware of is that that comes with this idea that it has to be historical, that it has to be like, oh, my family's lived here for generations. I have stories to share because I've lived here my whole life, or my great-great-grandfather moved here, or whatever that is. So we really try to be mindful of newer residents to a community and so one of the tools that we use is something called a memory map. So we draw a map of the town and we bring it to our different events. And if you want to add, this former church that used to be here in the 1800s, because you know a lot about the history, or if you want to mark a spot, that the place where we had our first kiss, or where my daughter broke her arm, and what are significant places and moments to you in your personal history, in your family history, in your ancestral history, so that it's not just focused on the old white Europeans that settled the town, and it's like looking more at who are we now, and what are the significant places now, of course drawing upon the history, but what are the significant places now, and how do we move forward with that? And then I also think that having more in moments of interaction than just the story sharing, where we can sing karaoke together, or play bingo, or whatever is happening, and just being there and being a part of again, I mean, we're all saying the same thing again, but being a part of the culture, integrating within the existing way of life, and then finding a way to celebrate that.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could jump in on what Bryan and Ashley said, I have a project that's upcoming. The Columbia River is a very important river in the Northwest, and there's a place called the Dalles that was a major trading area for the last 15,000 years. Very, very important. And in 1957, the dam was built, which buried the waterfalls there, which is a major, major fishing spot and trading area. So I've been privileged, and that's part of what I feel about doing these community projects and working with the communities. I feel like it's a privilege that I get to go in, and it's this place is at the site of one of the last Native American Indian villages along the Columbia River that still exist. Of course, it looks like some suburban neighborhood, but it is truly an indigenous village. And so I am going to get the privilege to work with these people to bring their voices, not for me to represent them, but for them to present through my work their feelings and thoughts about these buried waterfalls. Because what this is about, this place is about, like you said, Ashley, is not just looking at the past and as a European perspective, but also look at the future, and not the future of just the dam, but the future of the people that already live there, that have lived there for centuries. So it's a real exciting thing to do.
Thank you. I want to get to the second question because it's sort of, in some ways, the flip side of the first one that we've been talking about. So the question is, what role does policy play in rural arts work? Share times when a project you were doing impacted a local policy decision. And again, I'll open it up.
I can dive in first on this one. So we did a project in Fergus Falls called the Kirkbride Cycle, and we were working the Kirkbride building I mentioned earlier, the former state hospital in Fergus Falls. It's a building that has been off and on slated for demolition, has a strong and complicated history in the community. And Springboard for the Arts has an office based in Fergus Falls, and so they engaged Placebase Productions to come explore the history and tell the story, and really try to help remove some of the stigma around the building, and that it's not a haunted asylum up on the hill, but that it is a beautiful historic building that has potential for a lot of different futures. So as a part of that process, a member of our cast he's a local poet, philosopher, and he was a part of the cast and wasn't particularly involved in politics, but through being a part of the play experience, became really invested in the history of the Kirkbride building, or the future of the Kirkbride building and the history of the Kirkbride building. And following the play, he ran for office and on a write-in campaign and engaged a bunch of the cast members. So our cast is always very large. We have between 80 and 100 people from the town that do perform the play in spaces around the community. So it's always mobile, it's always interactive, we're always engaging with these significant places. So this particular show, the audience rode on bicycles around the building and interacted with 8 different scenes on this 3/4 of a mile loop. The reason we did bicycles for that play, just as a side note, is because they were working on bringing bike trails up there to get more people to interact with that landscape. So like, let's get bikes up here right now. Anyway, so Rod Speedall, who was in our play, ran for city council on a write-in campaign because he became so impassioned about the fate of the building, worked with a group of other cast members to do the campaign jingle, and he won. He won and is now on city council and is a huge advocate for historic preservation of this building. So there are these like mini stories and of people just becoming more involved in the civic engagement. We also always attend city council meetings and invite our cast to. So we're trying to always find that intersection of the art and the civic engagement and the public realm and how that all plays together and bringing people into that process.
Okay, thank you. Bryan, you want to, it may be a little bit different for you, but I'm curious how what you do as an individual artist in particular impacts how you see policy being developed. Did you get that? Okay.
Yeah, I got it. Sorry. Yeah, this question was kind of stumped me a little bit. Policy. I haven't really encountered a whole lot of policy yet, or decision with policy. I guess one thing that comes to mind, and this may be far from what is wanted, but the Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1990, which is basically a law that prohibits misrepresentation and marketing Indian arts and crafts within the U.S., and it's illegal to offer or display sell any craft or product that's not Indian produced. And so that, I mean, I was really thinking about this question last night, and that was, you know, the closest thing I could come to, and how that relates to what we do on the Rolling Res is when we go out on these buying days with the Red Cloud Heritage Center, artists are required to bring their tribal ID to show, to, you know, they are tribal members, but they have to have that proof. And that's the policy that they follow at the Heritage Center. And so, and as an artist, that's kind of what I encounter as well. Participating in different art markets around the country, and you know, they always want that's a rule, you know, that's established. It has to be Indian produced, and gosh, that's a pretty big question. But as far as running into any sort of policy, that's kind of where, you know, what I've ran into so far. I can definitely elaborate on any of that for you, or go a different route if. But I was having a hard time with the policy.
It's a difficult question, and it's not something that we address a lot of times because we're so busy doing the art. Your situation is somewhat unique. Policy, determining policy isn't always within local, you know, ability to do that. But you've given us a good start. I'm going to jump to Christina real quick because we need to move to general questions and then we'll come back. But if anything else pops in your mind, Bryan, just go ahead and jump.
Sure,
in.
absolutely.
Christina?
One, I like Bryan, I don't encounter policy a lot, except when I'm actually working on arts plans or creative placemaking plans. Then there are, you know, individuals who will give me the guidelines of what we can and cannot do. But in regard to artistic practice, I'm currently working with a 4-county group, partners, an alliance of 150 business, environmental, and civic partners to try to figure out how to bring art, do an art festival in our public spaces. And there are a lot of policies because these 4-county public spaces are owned by a variety of constituents, including the state, the city, the county, all these different places. We have one of the largest urban forests in America. It's 27 miles long. So it's how do we do that and still not infringe? We have accessibility issues. We have participation issues. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that I have to think about in designing this arts, like we're looking at doing a festival or a program in these public art spaces and developing a process that can be replicated year after year. So that's what we're encountering. But again, there are other people that are dealing with it much more directly than I am.
Real quick comment. My experience has been that in terms of impacting public policy, if art is brought for the community, it has one impact. If art comes from the community, and we're listening to 3 artists that are very much about that, it becomes very personal, and that has a direct impact on their lives in that local place and setting. So I've got a couple more questions here. I've been scanning the chat list, and I've got several comments, and mostly positive comments about the opportunity for the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and move to right now a couple of alternative questions we put up, and it's really the hard one, and I'm going to have to encourage you to be circumspect in your response. But what do you love about your work, about the communities, places with which you engage? What's your pond of joy?
I'll go ahead and start on that. Patrick, you just mentioned something really, really important, and that's when you're developing an arts program or a situation when you have people actually able to participate in the art, they take ownership in the art. And that's very important, and probably what gives me some of the greatest joy is being a catalyst for people to develop the art themselves, and to participate and engage with the places that, you know, I'm working in.
Ashley, Bryan?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I mean, you mentioned before, Christina, just the privilege of this work. I think being an outsider coming into a community has so many can have so many challenges or perceived challenges, but there's also a lot of benefits to being somebody who gets to enter and see. You know, when you're in it every day, it's hard to, for all of our lives, right? It's hard to recognize the things that that make our lives unique and special, because we end up taking them for granted, or our place is unique and special. So I think what I really love about it is being able to see a place with fresh eyes and help draw attention to the things that make these places really special, and that and then helping people connect to those places through story and through the art making process, but also helping people connect to each other, and recognizing what's special about your neighbors and the people that you live near and with, and in these geographic communities where you know, we really do have to all get along, even though we may have very, very different political views or backgrounds, whatever it is. But in order for our communities to continue to exist, you know, we have to work together, and being just one part, you know, one spoke in a massive wheel to help bring that all together is this huge privilege, and it's what I love the most about it, the connections to people and places, I guess, to say it more simply.
Thank you. Bryan, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I like that connection to people and places. What I really love about my work is just that, but I really love working with the people, and you know, the people inspire me in my own work, in my own life, to want to be better and do more creative things, and to try to bring more positive thinking to everyday life. And I kind of, the program that I do with Rolling Res is something that I kind of wish I had in my community growing up, or at least that way of thinking, which is trying to motivate and encourage people to do better, you know, and in terms of creativity and producing art and things like that. And I just love that you know, we take all these resources out to people who don't have resources, and we basically make something out of nothing, and we encourage them to try to be professional, and give them more skill so they can add more income to their families and their households. And so that's what I really love, is just being out there with people, and of course, being an artist, you know, it really doesn't feel like I'm working a lot of times. I'm out there, you know, doing art with people in these communities. So it's just been amazing so far, and I really love where I'm at. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Got a question here from Miranda Mullen, and it's to all panelists. As an aspiring architect, I want to work on creating architecture housing primarily that is affordable to residents and resonates with them culturally and in other ways. I want rural community members to feel pride in the place they live. And the thing I stumble on, this is going to be a surprise, the thing I stumble on is funding. I know rural communities do not get enough funding for housing and do not often have incomes that allow them to afford an architect. Someone from a lower income rural family, I wonder if you can offer resources or insights into how architecture and art can be made more accessible to these residents.
I can jump in here just with some resources. We're currently working in Milan, Minnesota, with the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, who received an Art Place grant to to do a myriad of projects, but one of the things that they're doing is engaging artists to do outreach in 3 different communities around affordable housing. So they have a fantastic program going on. It would be a great resource to talk with about the ways that they're engaging artists in this exact conversation. I won't go into too much details, but they're really accessible and happy to talk. And I think Miranda's based in Minnesota too, maybe?
Yes, I think, I believe it was,
The other resource that I would recommend is at the center in Green River, Utah. They're building, or they've built, I think it's called the Frontier House, and maybe Art of the Rural folks can help me out there with the website. But it's this really awesome design, small, kind of more on the smaller side house that's more affordable, that uses materials that are specifically for the desert landscape. Fascinating project, designed by artists and designers that really is born of the place. So that's another one that I would recommend.
and yes, Miranda's from Winona, Minnesota. Okay, Bryan, Christina, do you want to comment?
I haven't really worked with housing and architecture at all, so I'm afraid I can't really offer any resources here.
I'm in the same boat, and I think what Ashley said was right on the spot. Sorry, I can't contribute to that.
It's okay. I think this is part of the dilemma that a lot of people have in pursuing projects. My suggestion is to key in on a couple projects that that are listed up as models, find out who was responsible for that, give them a call, see if you can make a visit if they're accessible to you. And one of the things I have found about this field is we're incredibly generous with the resources that we have. We're not totally proprietary, although sometimes we want to protect our funding. But for the most part, I've learned most of us really want to help everybody else do the same kind of work. The more everybody else gets lifted up, the more our own work is. So we have just a very short amount of time. So I'm going to ask you a question and again, try to keep the response fairly concise. But the question is there one individual, text, or work of art that has been an inspiration to you or your organization as a whole? What has been your most important resource? Don't all speak at once.
I guess for me, there's actually 2 people really quick. I have to say, Lori Puyer, who's the director of First Peoples Fund. I think she's an amazing woman, and she's done so much to get this organization to where it is today and where it's going to be tomorrow and next week. And then also, I have to say, my wife. No, seriously, she's been an inspiration, and she's been behind me since day one, since I met her, to be more creative and to push my art to where it is and where it's going to go. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Okay. Actually, Christina, fairly short. We're on the verge of running out of time.
Well, I came to this from to this work with rural and natural landscapes through academics, through cultural geography. And so there were a couple of people, my art history professor, who really pushed me to learning cultural geography and connecting me to that. And then a fellow composer named Stephen Lias, whose focus is on national parks and how his philosophy and his thoughts about connecting with the landscape really have applications here too. So I would say those 2 individuals really helped shape my thinking. And of course, I've gone in my own direction. So I think, but you have to have a starting point. So those are mine.
Okay.
Yeah, on the like book academic side of things, James Thompson, who's a practitioner in applied theater, all of his books. They're amazing. But on a personal level, Laura Zabel with Springboard for the Arts, just for her fearlessness and continuing to push the conversation forward in including the rural placemaking as a part of the conversation. And then Patrick Moore is a local community organizer in Minnesota, who I bring up only because he was the first person who said yes to us. The way we got to come and start doing this work. And the people who say yes. So I'm gonna just like use Patrick Moore as a symbol for all of the people who say yes, come here and work with us and work, let's work together on this. They're the most important people in each community. So finding those yes people and knowing how to cultivate those relationships.
Thank you. I pushed most of my time at the beginning. Toward the end, I kind of want to make a bullet list. I believe in the power of collaboration and cooperation. What you've heard with our three artists today provide us with an example of that. Some really incredible people with a lot of fire in their belly, which is what it takes to do this work. Local people that help. So I'm going to summarize. I sort of have 7 comments. I've got the long version and the short version, and I'll mostly do the short version just as my observations. I hadn't gone to a conference until Iowa for about 10 years. I kind of got conferenced out and I didn't see us moving forward. The event in Iowa City was phenomenal and made me think. It rejuvenated a lot of my own fire inside that prompted me to do what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go down some notes real quick. So if I don't look right at the screen, it's because I want to be concise and not go over time. These are just 7 issues. Sort of think of them as 7 pieces of kindling wood for the Leadership Council. 1, I'm still convinced most people are arts scarred or arts scared. And this is particularly the case now. When I first came to that awareness was 25 years ago. We now have at least 2 generations of young people who have not had opportunities to discover the power of art in their life through their school experience. And it's really having an impact on their ability in many ways to think creatively and to have that experience that gives us so much joy. Second, public funding isn't the panacea of solutions for the work, and I get in trouble every time I say that. The bottom line is all of those funding opportunities, and if you want funding opportunities, connect with the National Endowment for the Arts. They may not be able to give you money, but they may be able to give you some good lists of places to start. All you've got to do is, it's like going to a library, you connect with one author, and then you look all the way around that author, and all of a sudden you've got 5 or 6 other resources available. I believe we have to impact public policy, but I don't think we've done enough work at the local level, and that's really where we need to do, and that sort of leads me to my 3rd and 4th point. I think we need to establish our own endowments for the arts, our own cultural endowments or community foundations in our smaller communities. And we need to do that through impacting public policy and doing a better job of telling their story, which is what all 3 of our artists have done today. You can't tell your story too often. And the more personal it is, the more local place-based it is, the more power. 5, because I combined 4 and 5, I think we need to be climate change warriors. And yes, to some degree, I am talking about climate change and its impact. But what I'm really talking about is the communication climate change in our communities and across the nation. I think we really need to find a way to invite people to be able to engage in constructive civil discourse. And I don't think anything does that better than involving people in a local arts experience where they get to know each other differently than what their perceptions are. 6, those of us need to, that do the work, and I've said this to the people I've trained for 25 years, keep the balance between the work-life balance as best you can. We are driven. We do walk around with a fire in our belly. We are driven people, and it's incredible work. Like all too often, sometimes we become more administrators than the artists we started out as. And I think we need to keep both. And I think in rural communities, there's lots of unique opportunities to do that. And finally, just recognizing the reality that most of us, I'm not going to say most of us didn't choose the work we're doing, but I think if we were interviewed 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and then look at where we are now, we would probably be surprised. So be open to the serendipity. There's always a serendipity wherever you go with whatever people that you know. So I've got right at 1 o'clock. I want to thank Ashley and Christina and Bryan for sharing your energy and your inspiration. And to all the people listening, I want to encourage you to keep the fires burning and make a difference. What you do matters, and what you do makes a difference. Okay, I'm finished.
Thanks so much, Patrick. And thank you, Christina, Ashley, and Bryan, for sharing your stories and for your ideas and experiences. We're so grateful to all of you. Thank you to all of you who are listening in today. You can join us on June 28th for our next digital exchange webinar at 12 p.m. Eastern. And that conversation is going to be focused on integrating community health, arts, and culture, and will feature Mario Gutierrez, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Connected Health Policy and the Chairman of the Rural Policy Research Institute Rural Human Services Advisory Panel, Dr. Jennifer Connor, who's a physician, a member of the Delta Regional Authority Leadership Institute, and a creative placemaking leader who lives and works in Lake Village, Arkansas, and Ann Basting, who is a professor of theater at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and the founder of Time Slips, a storytelling project with people with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers, and was also recently named a MacArthur Fellow. So we're really looking forward to that conversation on June 28th at noon Eastern, and thank you all so much for joining us here on the Digital Exchange webinar. We'd also like to thank the National Endowment for the Arts and the McKnight Foundation for helping to make this possible, and have a great day. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.